Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a really profound journey, I think. One that dares to connect, well, ancient wisdom with some of the most cutting-edge insights from modern science.
Yeah, it sounds ambitious, but fascinating.
Right. Imagine trying to correlate the epic philosophical battlefield of Kurukshetra, from the Bhagavad Gita,
Mm-hmm.
with the dynamic sort of probabilistic chaos happening inside the human brain. Stuff explored in that documentary, Human Brain and Quantum Physics.
It's quite a leap, bridging those two worlds.
It is.
Yeah.
And our mission today, well, it's clear. We're going to try and unpack how the internal struggles of Arjuna, right there on that ancient battlefield, how they might find some surprising, maybe even profound parallels with the quantum reality inside, well, inside your very own mind.
So sort of finding the universal in the specific, ancient and modern.
Exactly. Think of it as maybe a shortcut to getting informed on an intersection of ideas you might not have really considered before. It's pretty cool stuff.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do we start?
Okay, let's unpack this then. We have to begin with Arjuna. He's standing there on the edge of this devastating war.
Right, the Kurukshetra War.
Yes, and he's facing his own family, his teachers, people he respects, and this impossible choice. The Gita paints such a vivid picture of his inner conflict, doesn't it?
It really does. The bewilderment, the trembling.
Yeah, his mind bewildered, his body trembling, his famous bow, the Shiva actually slipping from his hand. He's just utterly overwhelmed, paralyzed by despair, by fear. He can't think straight, can't act rationally.
It's such a powerful depiction of inner turmoil. And what's fascinating, truly fascinating, is how directly that state connects with what modern neuroscience tells us about the brain's defensive mechanisms.
Okay, how so?
Well, that documentary, Human Brain and Quantum Physics, it highlights this beautifully. When we feel like our thoughts or maybe our core beliefs are being threatened, or even just when we hear opinions that are really different from ours, our brain doesn't just get a little stressed out, it actually kicks specific neurotransmitters into gear, like norepinephrine.
That's the fight or flight chemical, right?
Exactly, that powerful one. Your brain basically reacts as if you're in real physical danger. It releases the very same chemicals meant to keep you alive in, genuinely life-threatening situations.
Wow. So it's not just a feeling of being overwhelmed in your head. It's a literal, physical, biological response, like your body thinks it's under attack.
Precisely. And the consequences, well, it's profound. Your limbic system, that ancient part of your brain dealing with emotions, survival instincts, it can essentially hijack your higher level of thinking.
Jack.
Yeah, it physically narrows your focus. It dramatically limits your working memory. That's like your brain's mental scratch pad where you hold and process information short term.
So it makes it harder to think clearly.
Much harder. It's like trying to solve a complex problem with blinders on, and you see this play out all the time in everyday life, where you think about the politics of fear, how that works.
Yes.
Or skilled poker players manipulating their opponents, trying to put them on tilt. Or even just a really stubborn argument where, neither person can actually hear what the other is saying.
Right, because they're both kind of locked down emotionally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No matter how valuable or insightful an idea might be, your brain really struggles to process it when it's in that kind of threatened, narrow-minded state, like Arjuna's.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for me. Arjuna is paralyzed, stuck, right? In this defensive state you described. How does Lord Krishna, his guide, his charioteer, lead him out of it, out of this paralyzing despair?
It's the core of the Gita, isn't it? Krishna's guidance.
It is. And his core advice seems to be about abandoning attachment. Attachment to the results, attachment to personal feelings or relationships that cloud his duty.
Detachment from the fruits of action.
Yes, and to act with this unwavering focus on his dharma, his duty. Krishna emphasizes that truly wise people, they don't grieve for what's inevitable, past or future. He basically tells Arjuna to just act, get on with it.
And if we connect that back to the bigger picture in neuroscience, Krishna's advice finds this, compelling echo in the concept of neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity, the brain changing itself.
Exactly. Our brain's incredible ability to physically reshape itself, to literally rewire its connections based on what we do, what we experience, what we focus on. The documentary gives some great examples.
Like the musician.
Yeah, think about a musician practicing consistently. They're actually strengthening the neural connections between the two halves of their brain, which enhances creativity, dexterity, all of that.
Okay.
Or consider Rudiger Gayam. This guy apparently failed basic math in school.
Really?
Yeah. But through relentless practice, just sheer effort, He trained himself to become a human calculator, performing these incredibly complex mental computations.
Wow. So it's not just about learning a skill like playing piano or math.
Mhm.
It's actually changing the physical structure of your brain.
That's exactly it. And these aren't just, isolated party tricks. They demonstrate that things like rationality or emotional resilience, they aren't fixed traits you're just born with.
Right.
They are neural connections. And like a muscle, they can be strengthened through consistent practice. It's a really powerful insight, I think. Whatever you are doing at any time, you are physically modifying your brain to become better at it.
Yeah.
And this directly supports the Gita's emphasis on abhyasa, that's consistent practice and cultivating self-awareness to gain control over your internal state.
So by consciously doing our duty, like Krishna advises, trying to find emotional balance, we're literally rewiring our brains.
Yes. Rewiring them for greater clarity, for more resilience, making ourselves less reactive, less likely to fall into that defensive state.
That leads us, I think, to an even deeper question. The nature of the self. I mean, who are we in all this? The Gita talks so profoundly about the Atman.
The soul or the true self.
Right, often translated as soul, but maybe more accurately, it's presented as your eternal, unchanging essence, something totally distinct from your body and your mind, which are always changing, always transient. Krishna insists that the roller coaster, joy and sorrow, honor and dishonor, those are experiences of the body and mind. They don't touch this deeper, immutable self. So what does modern science say about consciousness and identity? How does it compare?
That's a huge question, isn't it? And the documentary, it sheds some really fascinating light on just how complex and distributed the brain is.
Yeah.
It reveals that, there's no specific center of consciousness.
No CEO in the brain.
Exactly. No little person pulling the levers. Instead, consciousness seems to arise from this vastly parallel distributed system. Think of it like countless separate neural circuits firing, being enabled, being expressed at any particular moment.
Okay.
So the appearance of unity, that single self that we all feel, that sense of I, it's actually this beautiful convergence, this harmony of all these different neural interactions happening at once.
So that feeling of me isn't located in one spot.
Wow.
It's more like a constantly evolving symphony of brain activity.
That's a great way to put it, yeah, a symphony. And what's even more, mind-bending is just how dynamic this system is. The documentary states every moment we are, in fact, a different image, a different entity.
Whoa, wait. Every moment a different entity.
In a way, yes, because our experiences are constantly changing our neural connections, physically altering that parallel system that is our consciousness. And a key part of this dynamic self, something the documentary touches on, is the mirror neuron system.
Wow, the empathy neurons.
Right. These connect us to others. They allow us to sort of feel what others are feeling, but they also profoundly contribute to our self-reflection, how we see ourselves.
How so?
Well, the mirror neuron system doesn't really make a strong distinction between self and other. It kind of blurs the lines, which helps explain why we humans are so dependent on social validation, why we instinctively want to fit in.
Like Arjuna's fear of being called a coward if he didn't fight.
Exactly like that. It's deeply wired. But crucially, the documentary also explains that when we are self-aware, we can alter misplaced emotions because we control the thoughts that cause them.
Okay, self-awareness is key again.
Yeah.
How does that work neurologically?
It seems to be rooted in how your brain updates memories, a process called memory reconsolidation. By activating your self-regulating neocortical regions, those higher-level thinking parts, planning, decision-making, you can actually reconsolidate or kind of rewrite the emotional context of past experiences. This gives us an incredible amount of potential control over our feelings. Every time we practice the self-awareness, this emotional regulation, our rationality and resilience get stronger. We're literally building those neural pathways.
That is powerful. Okay, now, let's bring in the really weird stuff. Quantum physics. Could Krishna's concept of the witnessing Atman, that unchanging eternal observer separate from the mind and body, could that possibly align with ideas from quantum mechanics, specifically the observer effect?
This is where things get truly profound, and they really challenge our everyday common sense understanding of reality. The quantum insights from the documentary definitely push these boundaries.
Where do we start with that?
Well, we can start with Louis de Broglie's discovery. groundbreaking stuff. He found that all matter has a wave-particle duality, meaning everything behaves both like a wave spread out, probabilistic, full of potential, and like a distinct particle, a fixed point in space and time, depending on how you observe it, essentially.
So everything, even us, can be both a wave and a particle.
Okay.
That's hard to grasp.
It is. It absolutely is. Then there's this really profound equation presented in the documentary, C equal H.
CHF. What does that mean?
Okay, so C stands for consciousness. H is Planck's constant. That's a fundamental number in quantum physics, super tiny. And F stands for frequency.
Consciousness equals Planck's constant times frequency.
Yes. And this isn't just, abstract math. It's putting forward a radical idea that C, consciousness, isn't just some byproduct of our complex brain wiring. Instead, it's suggesting consciousness itself is fundamental. A quantized unit, like a packet of energy, that defines our experience of the now. Every single moment you experience is like a quantum of consciousness, a minimum unit of interaction.
A minimum unit of experience.
And provocatively, the documentary suggests the sum of all these moments, C, all these quanta of experience, up until the current moment. That's what shapes our concept of life, implying that life and death are abstract constructions of C.
Revolutionary. Thinking of life and death as constructions of consciousness moments. Does this also relate to that quantum idea of things being in multiple places at once? Like Schrödinger's cat?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
That leads us straight into quantum superposition.
Superposition, right.
Imagine a coin spinning in the air. Before it lands, it's not heads or tails. It's kind of both simultaneously. It exists in a state containing both possibilities. That's superposition. A quantum particle occupying all of its possible quantum states simultaneously? Experiments like the double-slit experiment clearly show this happens. It fundamentally challenges our classical, everyday notion of a single fixed reality.
Because reality isn't fixed until it's measured or observed, in a sense.
Sort of. The documentary pushes this further, explaining that any single, separate, minimum unit of experience, that quantum C moment, is always instantly annihilated within a timeless now. It also clarifies things a bit. It's not just that reality magically collapses into being when we look. It's a more nuanced process called quantum decoherence.
Decoherence.
Yeah, which explains how these quantum possibilities, this wave of potential, sort of settle down or lose their quantum weirdness and solidify into the fixed classical reality we perceive around us. It suggests our world is far more fluid, more dynamic, more probabilistically constructed than we usually assume.
Okay, that is a lot to take in. Decoherence, superposition, consciousness as quanta. Let's shift gears slightly, but maybe it connects. Let's delve into one of humanity's biggest, oldest questions. Free will versus destiny.
Ah, the classic.
Right. And the Gita presents this fascinating tension. On one hand, Krishna tells Arjuna that events are, in a way, predestined. He says he's merely an instrument in a larger divine plan, that many warriors on the battlefield are essentially already destined to die.
Even without you, all these warriors will cease to exist.
Exactly. Yet at the very same time, Krishna is urging Arjuna to act decisively, to control his mind, to choose to fulfill his duty. How do we even begin to reconcile that apparent paradox?
It's a tough one. And from a scientific angle, the Human Brain and Quantum Physics documentary offers some intriguing perspectives on this free will versus determinism debate.
Like what?
Well, it acknowledges those neurological studies, the ones that have shown that action, like the decision to move your finger, is indeed initiated in the brain before we become consciously aware of making that decision.
Right, the Libet experiments and similar findings, which seems to suggest...
Which often leads people to a deterministic viewpoint, yeah. Suggesting our conscious will is just an illusion, an after-the-fact story we tell ourselves about choices that were already made unconsciously.
So are we just puppets of our unconscious brain processes then? Is free will just gone?
Well, not necessarily. The documentary crucially presents a counter-argument. It states that a deterministic point of view is based on an erroneous concept of time.
An erroneous concept of time.
Yes, as is illustrated by the mathematical probability descriptions in quantum mechanics. This throws a wrench in simple cause and effect determinism, especially if time isn't just a straight line forward, as quantum physics might suggest.
Interesting. So quantum uncertainty messes with pure determinism.
It certainly complicates it. The documentary also talks about how our brain hemispheres shape our reality. The left hemisphere, it says, is busy creating a coherent belief system. It likes stories, explanations, and it tends to deny or ignore information that doesn't fit its established narrative.
The storyteller brain.
Kind of, yeah. Well, the right hemisphere is constantly challenging the status quo. It's more open to novelty, ambiguity, anomalies. It forces a revision of our worldview when the inconsistencies become too big to ignore.
Okay, so there's this internal tension.
Right. And here's the problem related to free will. The more attached we are to a belief system, the less able we are to make conscious choices for ourselves.
Yeah.
Think about how hard it is to change someone's mind about a deeply held political or religious belief. That attachment limits flexibility.
Because the left brain is just filtering out anything that contradicts the story.
In large part, yes. But here's the powerful insight, the ray of hope for free will, perhaps. By observing this process, this internal battle, this denial and attachment, we expand our awareness and enhance our free will.
Observing the process, like mindfulness.
Exactly. It suggests a way to reclaim agency. By becoming self-aware of our own cognitive biases, our emotional attachments, our brain's storytelling tendencies, we can step back, become the observer of our own mental processes, rather than just being swept along by them.
And this connects so beautifully, almost perfectly, back to the Gita's core teachings on action and attachment, doesn't it?
It really does seem to.
Krishna encourages Arjuna to perform his duties without attachment to the fruits of action. Detachment again. He explicitly states that man is great by karma, not birth, putting the emphasis squarely on our actions, our choices, not some fixed lineage or destiny.
What action defines you?
And while Krishna acknowledges that controlling the mind is incredibly difficult, like controlling the wind, he assures Arjuna that it can be brought under control by practice. Abhyasa, again. And the Gita says, almost directly echoing the science, that there is no such thing as a free choice while being emotionally attached to a belief system.
The parallels are quite striking when you put them side by side like that.
They really are.
And if we try to synthesize this, maybe bring it all together. Both the Gita and these scientific insights seem to point towards a similar conclusion, that perhaps a purely scientific view, or maybe just a clear, objective view, with no attachment to our identity or story, yields a far more accurate, meaningful, and ethical paradigm than our anecdotal values.
So letting go of the story helps us see more clearly.
It seems so. This detachment, ironically, might be what fosters genuine growth, happiness, maybe even freedom. It alleviates that constant psychological need for distraction or for external validation, and it allows for truly constructive behavior. The documentary notes that our common cultural belief for a long time has been that we need a continuous narrative, a story, what it calls a diachronic view of our life, stretching from past to future to establish our moral values, our sense of identity.
We need to know who we are based on where we've been and where we're going.
Right. But maybe, just maybe, a lack of that compulsive labeling and a psychological need to impose expectations actually leads to a more functional, more adaptable brain. A brain that aligns remarkably well with the Gita's call for dispassionate action, for self-mastery, for seeing things as they are.
Oh. Okay, so as we wrap up this pretty intense deep dive, it feels clear we've uncovered some genuinely profound correlations, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. It's been quite a journey connecting these dots.
From Arjuna's internal battlefield mirroring our own brain chemistry under stress, to the complex, maybe even transient nature of the self, as understood, or at least questioned, by both ancient spiritual texts and cutting-edge quantum physics.
Right, the distributed consciousness versus the eternal Atman.
And finally, getting into that incredibly nuanced interplay of free will and destiny, where both traditions seem to suggest that attachment is the real obstacle to freedom.
Yeah. What's truly fascinating here, I think, is that both the Bhagavad Gita and modern quantum brain science, I mean, they come from vastly different origins, different times, different methods, yet they both really invite us, push us to question our everyday conventional understanding of reality, of time, of consciousness itself.
They both shake things up.
They do. They both point towards an interconnectedness that's maybe far more intricate than we typically imagine, and towards a dynamic, probabilistic nature of existence where absolute certainty might just be an illusion we create for comfort.
So as we leave you to ponder all this, maybe consider this final provocative thought. If, as that quantum physics documentary suggests, time does not differ from the notion of distance, if it's just another dimension in a way, and if our actual experience of the present moment is instantly annihilated within a timeless now, constantly refreshing, how might actively embracing this moment, this now, as the Gita so powerfully encourages through focused action and awareness, how might that fundamentally transform your experience of life, your ability to consciously shape your reality moment by moment.
And building on that, if karma is identity, as the Gita implies, through action defining the person, and if, neurologically, every second we become different persons because our neural connections are constantly shifting.
Yeah, the ever-changing symphony.
What does it truly mean, then, to cultivate good karma? To act wisely and ethically across these continually evolving moment-to-moment selves?
Deep questions to sit with. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.